Imagine waking up in a bed that isn't yours, looking in the mirror at a face that looks like yours but feels like a total stranger's, and realizing that within the next hour, you have to fool a room full of people into believing you are someone you've spent your whole life resenting. I'm talking about the moment I walked into my twin sister's high-stakes corporate boardroom, sweating through a designer suit she paid more for than my entire car is worth, knowing that if I tripped over a single word, her multi-million-dollar career would go up in flames. And she was currently back at my house, likely ruining my reputation with my landlord and my boyfriend. We swapped lives for 72 hours as a desperate, last-ditch effort to prove whose life was actually harder. But what started as a petty sibling rivalry turned into a psychological nightmare that uncovered secrets about our family, our partners, and ourselves that can never be unheard. By the end of day 2, I wasn't just playing a character. I was uncovering a web of lies that made me wonder if I ever really knew my sister at all, or if our entire lives had been a carefully constructed performance. Was I wrong for pushing this bet to the absolute limit just to see her break, or would you have done the exact same thing if your sibling constantly looked down on you from a pedestal of perfection? To understand how we got to this point of total identity theft, you have to understand the dynamic between me and my sister, Maya. We are identical twins, but that is where the similarities end. I've always been the creative one, which is just a polite family way of saying I'm the one who struggles to pay rent on time while working 3 freelance gigs and living in a studio apartment that smells faintly of oil paint and cheap coffee. Maya, on the other hand, is the human equivalent of a polished diamond. She's a high-level corporate consultant, the kind of person who uses words like synergy and optimization without irony, lives in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, and treats her life like a military operation. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, and every random Sunday brunch, the narrative was always the same. Maya was the success, and I was the free spirit everyone secretly worried about. Our parents, God bless them, didn't even realize they were doing it, but they'd spend 40 minutes bragging about Maya's latest promotion before turning to me and asking if I'd found a real job yet, or if I was still playing with my brushes. The resentment didn't happen overnight. It was a slow burn, built over 2 decades of being the shadow to her son. It was the way she'd offer to pay for my coffee with a sigh, or how she'd look at my thrifted clothes like they were covered in radioactive waste. The tension finally boiled over during our 26th birthday dinner at this incredibly overpriced fusion restaurant Maya chose specifically because it was exclusive. Halfway through the appetizers, Maya made a condescending comment about my little art projects and suggested she could do my entire week's worth of work in a single afternoon while taking her lunch break. She laughed, that sharp, ringing laugh that always made me feel small, and said, "Honestly, your life is just one long vacation with no structure. I don't know how you live with so much clutter." I snapped. I told her she wouldn't last 3 hours in my world without a personal assistant to tell her when to breathe or a spreadsheet to explain her emotions. I told her that her high-stakes world was just a fancy game of pretend with better clothes. She countered by saying I'd collapse under the pressure of her real responsibilities before the first coffee break. That was when the bet was born, a 72-hour total life swap. We exchanged keys, phones, passwords, and wardrobes. The rules were simple. No contacting our real friends, no breaking character, and the loser had to pay the winner's rent or mortgage for an entire year. It felt like a game at first, a way to finally prove her wrong, but I had no idea I was walking into a minefield of emotional trauma and legal jeopardy. Day 1 started at 5 a.m. in Maya's penthouse. I was awoken by a sunrise alarm clock that simulated a Himalayan morning, and within minutes, her smart home was barking scheduled tasks at me through speakers hidden in the ceiling. It felt like being in a futuristic prison. I had to navigate her wardrobe, which looked like a monochrome museum of beige, navy blue, and charcoal gray. There wasn't a single splash of personality, just rows of identical silk blouses and tailored trousers. Putting on her persona felt like putting on a suit of armor that was 2 sizes too small for my soul. I spent the morning at her firm, terrified that her assistant, Sarah, would notice the slight difference in the way I drink my coffee. Maya takes it black and bitter, while I usually need enough cream to turn it the color of a sunset. I spent 4 hours in meetings nodding solemnly and saying things like, "Let's circle back to that, and I'll take it under advisement," praying no one would ask me a technical question about the quarterly projections. The sheer amount of jargon was dizzying. People were talking about scalability and market penetration, while I was just trying to figure out how to unlock her laptop without the facial recognition failing, because I was sweating so much. My skin felt itchy in her expensive wool, and every time the phone rang, my heart skipped a beat. I had to mimic her posture, shoulders back, chin up, a look of perpetual boredom mixed with authority. Meanwhile, Maya was at my studio, dealing with my eccentric landlord, Mr. Henderson, who refuses to use an app and insists on being paid in cash while talking about his latest conspiracy theories for 40 minutes. She sent me a cryptic text from my own phone, which was technically against the rules, that simply said, "Your life is a chaotic disaster. Your neighbor's cat is currently staring at me through the window, like it wants to eat my soul. How do you live like this?" I felt a surge of triumph, thinking I was winning. I imagined her trying to figure out which of my 3 mismatched keys opened the mailbox, or how to deal with the flickering light in the bathroom that I'd been ignoring for 6 months. I thought about her trying to find the organic kale she loves in my neighborhood bodega, where the best thing on the shelf is a dusty can of beans. I thought the hardest part for her would be the lack of a maid service, but then things took a dark turn for me. By the evening of the first day, I was scrolling through Maya's private messages to find a contact for a dinner meeting she had scheduled. I felt a bit guilty, like I was violating her privacy, but we had agreed to full access. That's when I saw a thread that made my blood run cold. It was with a man named Julian. I knew Julian, he was her perfect fiancé, the guy our parents adored because he came from good stock and worked in private equity. But the messages weren't romantic. They weren't even friendly. They were cold, transactional, and terrifying. It looked like Maya was paying off a massive gambling debt for him, something in the high 6 figures, and in exchange he was helping her funnel money out of her company's discretionary fund to cover the tracks. My perfect sister wasn't just a corporate shark, she was a white-collar criminal, and she was using the perfect daughter image as a shield. The messages implied that if the firm ever caught wind of the missing funds, she was the one who would take the fall because her name was on all the digital signatures. Julian was playing her, or they were playing the world together. The deeper I scrolled, the worse it got. There were photos of documents, offshore account numbers, and threats. Julian wasn't just a partner. He was a parasite. I spent the night in her massive, lonely bed, staring at the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city lights, wondering if I should call the whole thing off, or use this information to finally knock her off her throne. I felt like I was holding a live grenade. On day 2, the pressure intensified. I had to give a presentation to the board of directors regarding a merger that was supposed to be the crowning achievement of Maya's career. I stayed up all night memorizing her notes, fueling myself with her expensive espresso and a simmering rage. I realized that Maya's hard life wasn't just about work. It was about the crushing weight of maintaining a lie that was getting heavier by the second. Every smile she gave our parents was a performance. Every success was built on a foundation of sand. She wasn't successful because she was better than me. She was successful because she was better at hiding the mess. I felt a weird sense of pity for her, realizing she had no one to talk to, no one who actually knew the real her. But that pity vanished when I got a call from my boyfriend Leo. Except he didn't know he was calling me. He thought he was calling me and talking to Maya. I listened in horror as Maya, pretending to be me, started picking a fight with him. She used personal insecurities I had shared with her in confidence, things about my fear of never being good enough for him, to dismantle our relationship. She told him he was holding me back, that I needed space to find my true artistic voice, and that maybe we should take a break. She was using my voice to stab the person I loved most in the heart. She wasn't just trying to win the bet. She was trying to destroy the only parts of my life that actually brought me joy. She was burning my world down while I was busy trying to keep hers afloat. I sat in her designer chair, shaking with fury, realizing that the sister I thought was just stuck up was actually malicious. She wanted me to have nothing so she could feel like she had everything. I realized then that her optimization of her life included optimizing me out of existence. I spent the rest of the day in a blur of anger and calculation. I started looking into the company's internal audit trails. If I was going to be her for another 24 hours, I was going to use her power to settle the score. So that is the situation I was in, standing in a glass office, holding the evidence of my sister's financial crimes in one hand, while listening to her systematically sabotage my relationship with the man I love in the other. I had to make a choice between keeping the peace or burning everything to the ground. Before I tell you what happened next and how I handled the final 24 hours of this identity heist, I want you to pause right now and comment below. If you found out your perfect sibling was a criminal, but they were currently destroying your life out of spite, would you expose them to the world, or would you try to save them? What would you have done in my shoes? The third day was when the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. I decided that if Maya wanted to play dirty, I was going to play for keeps. I showed up to her office for the final board meeting, but instead of the optimized presentation she had prepared, I loaded a different set of files onto the server. She told him he was holding me back, that I needed space to find my true artistic voice, and that maybe we should take a break. She was using my voice to stab the person I loved most in the heart. She wasn't just trying to win the bet. She was trying to destroy the only parts of my life that actually brought me joy. She was burning my world down while I was busy trying to keep hers afloat. I sat in her designer chair, shaking with fury, realizing that the sister I thought was just stuck up was actually malicious. She wanted me to have nothing so she could feel like she had everything. I realized then that her optimization of her life included optimizing me out of existence. I spent the rest of the day in a blur of anger and calculation. I started looking into the company's internal audit trails. If I was going to be her for another 24 hours, I was going to use her power to settle the score. So that is the situation I was in, standing in a glass office, holding the evidence of my sister's financial crimes in one hand, while listening to her systematically sabotage my relationship with the man I love in the other. I had to make a choice between keeping the peace or burning everything to the ground. Before I tell you what happened next and how I handled the final 24 hours of this identity heist, I want you to pause right now and comment below. If you found out your perfect sibling was a criminal, but they were currently destroying your life out of spite, would you expose them to the world, or would you try to save them? What would you have done in my shoes? The third day was when the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. I decided that if Maya wanted to play dirty, I was going to play for keeps. I showed up to her office for the final board meeting, but instead of the optimized presentation she had prepared, I loaded a different set of files onto the server. These files contain the screenshots of her conversations with Julian and the ledger of the diverted funds. My plan was to end the presentation by revealing the truth, resigning in her name, and walking away. I wanted her to feel the weight of the world crashing down, just like she made me feel when she talked to Leo. I wanted her to see the clutter of her own life exposed in front of the people she valued most. But before I could pull the trigger, I received a frantic video call on my own phone. It was Maya. She was at my art studio, and she looked absolutely terrified. Her hair was a mess, her makeup was smudged, and she was hiding in the small storage closet where I keep my extra canvases. Apparently, some of the people I owe creative favors to, people who aren't exactly part of the corporate world, like the local street artists who helped me with murals, had shown up looking for me. They weren't there for a synergy talk. They were there because I'd promised to help them with a project that involved a bit of guerrilla marketing on a city wall. And they weren't interested in her excuses. They thought she was me, and they were demanding the work I had promised, getting loud and aggressive in the hallway. They were threatening to trash the place if they didn't get their supplies. Seeing her stripped of her power, cowering in my paint-splattered workspace, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, I realized that we were both drowning in different oceans. She was drowning in a sea of corporate greed and lies, and I was drowning in a sea of unstructured chaos and broken promises. I realized that if I pushed that button and showed those slides, I wasn't just winning a bet. I was destroying a human being who was already at her breaking point. I looked at the board of directors waiting for Maya to speak, and I realized that if I destroyed her, I wouldn't feel better. I'd just be the person who broke my own sister. She hasn't made a single comment about my little art projects since, and she even helped me set up a proper business structure for my freelance work, so I wouldn't have people banging on my door for favors anymore. She actually invested in my next gallery show. I had to spend weeks apologizing to Leo, explaining that I'd had a nervous breakdown, which wasn't entirely a lie, to explain my behavior while Maya was in my shoes. It took time, and a lot of honest conversations, but he forgave me. We're stronger now than we were before. For the first time in our lives, Maya and I aren't competing to see who is better. We're just acknowledging that both our lives were built on fragile foundations. Maya still has her high-rise, and I still have my studio, but the wall between us is gone. We realize that being identical doesn't mean we have to be the same. It just means we have someone who understands the parts of us no one else can see. The 72 hours taught me that the grass isn't just greener on the other side. It's usually artificial and covering up a lot of dirt. It taught me that everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about, even the person you think has it all. We still have a long way to go to rebuild our trust, and sometimes I still look at her and wonder what other secret she's hiding, but at least now we're looking at each other as human beings instead of rivals. The moral of this story is that you never truly know the weight someone else is carrying until you're forced to walk a mile in their uncomfortable, expensive shoes. Comparison truly is the thief of joy. And sometimes the person you envy the most is the person who is the most desperate to escape their own reality. If this story made you rethink your relationship with your siblings, or if you've ever felt the pressure to live up to an impossible standard, please hit that like button to let me know I'm not alone in this. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the shocking and emotional stories that happen behind closed doors every day. And seriously, I want to hear your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments. Did I do the right thing by saving her, or should she have faced the consequences of her actions? Did I let her off too easy after what she did to Leo? Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all in the next story.